This is experience number 5 in A New Experience in the Art of Living. In the next 3 hours, you will learn the secret of determining and controlling your emotional environment and also develop your decision-making ability. Here is Professor Howard Watrous.
I'd like for you to think of 2 words tonight. And I'd like to outline them as 2 enemies of yours. Number 1, procrastination. Have you ever met this guy? And number 2, indecisiveness. And I'd like to look at these 2 cousins, and I'd like to give you a formula tonight of 7 points called the 7 Ds, which will be instant death for both of them. When I think of the actual public, I think of a tired public. And people are always wanting to know, where is the loss of energy? Where's the energy leak? Tonight we're going to examine one of the major energy leaks in the human being, and that is the fact that he cannot make an accurate and a quick decision, and the delay kills him. In other words, from the time that you know a decision should be made until the time that that decision is made, it's as if we opened a valve on a boiler at the bottom and let the water start draining out. Now, how long will it take you to be sapped? Weak and exhausted. Now, not only is your energy leaving your body, your self-image is disintegrating. In other words, your opinion of who you think you are is diminishing. You realize that I don't know what to do. I believe that if a man has to go ask another man, what would you do in this situation, he has damaged his self-image. Now, this statement will have implications in many areas of your life. But what we're saying is that I am not capable of making a decision. I have to go ask somebody else, what would you do if you were in this situation? Now, at first, this appears like that this is what you should do. This appears like this is really the answer to go. But let's look at it for just a moment. First of all, if I cannot make a decision, it means I'm in a state of indecisiveness, which we'll show tonight you should never be in. The next thing, it means that I'm not capable in myself to make this decision. All right, now when I put these 2 things together, what kind of an effect does this have on my self-image? By the way, normally by this time am I tense? In other words, I'm suffering from a little tension because I'm in this state of indecisiveness. And I'm also really saying to the person that I have been indecisive long enough till now I'm not sure what to do. Now, a lot of gentlemen at about this stage of the game fear responsibility. Now, always when you make a decision, is there responsibility that goes with it. So they go in, they talk to their wife. Now, they hide under a guise of democracy, and they say, what do you think? She tells them what she thinks. Is that all they want? No, because this would still leave the responsibility on their shoulders. So they think a little bit, and they say, what would you do? She looks at this poor helpless puppy. She says, we can't let him go on in agony any longer. So she says what, and by the way, does she know full well, right while she's telling him what she would do, who's going to take the responsibility for this decision? She is. By the way, he does the same thing at work with a committee. Calls this committee together, says, what are your gentlemen's opinions? They give him their opinion, and then he should leave the group, go to another room, and make a decision for which he's responsible, but he'll make the committee vote. Well, it doesn't really get him off the hook, because when the decision is wrong, he fires the committee. Then the board of directors turn around and relieve him of his duties. And he finally realizes in the end that he is responsible. We're saying then tonight that one of the criteria of being an individual is to be able to chart a course of action. In other words, there is no uniqueness or other characteristics that would describe the personage of you if you can't make a decision. So we say tonight that if you lack the ability to make a decision, your self-image keeps dropping and dropping until pretty soon you walk around and bump into the people in your life, those that you encounter, and say, to the best of my knowledge, here are the facts. You're saying, well, I'm capable of gathering facts. Would you tell me which way to go again? The point is, do you have to know how to make a decision? And we've brought this subject up many times. To love yourself, to truly love yourself, decision-making ability has to be perfected to the nth degree. Now, on my ranch, I have some sheep. And we'll be driving the sheep this way, and all at once, one sheep decides he's going that way. He turns. It's interesting, the sheep right behind him does what? Turns. Pretty soon, the whole herd has gone the way of the one sheep. So we go over and we have to turn them all around and start them again. Now we say the second sheep and the rest of the entire herd did not think. Now, have you ever heard humans compared to sheep? Another reason, apart from responsibility, that men do not want to make a decision is fear. In other words, why should I decide something and chart a course of action if I will actually encounter criticism? In other words, if you decide to do a certain thing, will somebody along the line tell you you're wrong? And by the way, have you ever heard that this simple 3 words, fear no man? I love those words. Now, if you are going to live under those 3 words, fear no man, what are you going to do after you make a decision? Have confidence in what? Yourself. This gets right down to the basis of it. In other words, I'm going to do this. Why? Because I think this is what's right. Well, is this what the majority is doing now? No. Are you beginning to see now you're beginning to be threatened? In other words, does anyone else agree with you? And by the way, if you're real matured, here's what you'll say. I really can't help it that the rest of the world's wrong today. Let's go into it tonight and examine the actual principles of 7 ways to make decisions. Now, as I go through the 7 ways, I'm going to give you 4 first, followed by 3. The 4 are no good. They are psychologically correct. In other words, this is the way you function psychologically, but I would not recommend that you follow these 4 ways. Then, after I have taught you the 4 ways that work psychologically, in other words, so you understand the decision-making process, then I'm going to share with you 3 choice ways. And these are the 3 that I use to make decisions. I do not use the first 4. When you learn tonight the magic of making decisions and your self-image grows 10 feet tall, you're going to feel great because you're going to know who you are, you're going to understand yourself, and you're going to be able tomorrow to make decisions just like that. And then we'll come back to our original standards of success. The foundation, which we're going to need for the next few sessions, is to fall in love with yourself. Now, can you visualize a guy standing here with his finger in his mouth? Da. Is that like a baby? Can you keep that image in your mind for a while? Now, what have I described? That's the guy who doesn't know which way to turn. Now, as I did that, it bothered some of you just to see me do it. But I want you to realize the next time you come up to a point to make a decision and you do not, are you doing that? Well, you might not know it, but your children will. If I were to go to a beehive tonight to try to extract the honey, I would be afraid that I would get stung. And I would send out a certain kind of an odor. And then the bees would smell this odor, and they would know that it was all right to go ahead and sting me. And then they would. Now, there are other people tonight who know that the bees will not sting them, therefore they have no fear. And what do you suppose they can do when they go to a beehive? Without wearing any kind of extra clothing, they can take the honey and the bees just sit there and watch them. We say then that you have a certain odor coming off of your body that the bees can smell. Let's use the same illustration tonight with a dog. I actually paid $400 for a guard dog. which I believed was a tough dog. In other words, I didn't think he had any fear in him at all. Everybody who would come, he would come out there and act real fierce. Finally, a man came, and I was very surprised to find my very tough, ferocious dog hiding in the bushes. And I found out that this man had no fear of German Shepherds whatsoever. He had worked with them and trained them, and a guard dog to him was just like any other puppy. The dog smelled this and knew that this was no match for him, and away he went. Now, I've also had a situation with a horse where if you knew a lot about horses and had no fear of them, you could ride this horse and have no problems whatsoever. But if you didn't, the horse could smell it, and he'd know how to deposit you on the ground quickly with no questions asked. Now, if we blindfold the dog or the horse, they will react the same way. So therefore we know they're not looking at something, they're smelling something. Now, if you would wear perfume or deodorant or aftershave lotion, would you change this? Is there something coming off of you tonight stronger than your perfume or your deodorant or your aftershave lotion? Now, when something evaporates, such as perfume or the smell of smoke, we say that the actual chemistry of the liquid goes into the air, and then that actual chemistry goes into your nostrils. So you're picking up the actual chemistry when you smell. Therefore, we say that it is an evaporation process. Therefore, on the pores of your skin tonight, is there something evaporating? And it is something that can be picked up and something that can be smelled. Now, if it's evaporating, it must be evaporating from a liquid. Let's go back to 1890. This is an experiment that I read about in the book called In Tune with the Infinite. By the way, I'd recommend that if you can find this book, read it. It's out of print, but it's a marvelous book. In this book, it describes an experiment where they lined these men up in a steam room. They gave one man a book to read that made him angry, another one jealous, another one with sex passion, right on down the line with all of the emotions. Then they took some perspiration and some saliva on a slide, took it to the laboratory, and the man in the laboratory could tell you which man was reading which story. You see, all they do, they put the slide out here and they drop a little chemical on it, and that turns pink. And he knows that the saliva that came from that man is angry. Now, all of the body secretions that you have are affected by your body chemistry. You have two kinds of body chemistry, basically, tonight. Now, I know there are a lot of people who think they're acid and they're alkaline, and there are all kinds of ideas, but we're going to call them tonight negative and positive. Now, the positive emotions are emotions that will give you warmth and comfort, a good feeling. The negative emotions are more like harassment. In other words, have you ever had a rough day and you feel like you've just had all you can take, and it would be just nice to build a fire in the fireplace and then do what? Sort of get healed. In other words, watch the fire, and as the fire is burning, you begin to feel the warmth from the fire, and then it goes into your body, and what's happening now to your body chemistry? It's beginning to change back to positive. Have you ever, in an embrace with your spouse, in a kiss that could go on for maybe 1 or 2 or 3 minutes, I suppose you still kiss that long after you're married. Did you know what happens as you keep kissing? There's a certain chemistry change takes place in your body. You feel a warmth coming over your entire body. Basically, you're becoming positive again. Now, after you've had any type of a dealing negatively, do you search out something positive? Well, there's even times when you like to even give yourself a treat. Would you feel like, I deserve something now? In other words, you realize I've had enough negativism, and now I've got to have some positive reactions. You see, if I have these positive reactions, then I feel like I'm going to be well again and healthy again and happy again. So we're describing everything then as negative or positive in the entire world, and we're talking about basically your emotions. Not only do animals teach us negative body chemistry, also with animals you can learn positive body chemistry. Let me give you an illustration of one of my employees. He was out on the edge of the forest and he saw a baby deer. Immediately he began thinking, with all the concentration that he had, he began thinking just one thought: total relaxation. The little deer looked at him, moseyed up closer to him. He moved closer to the little deer, and before he could even realize it, he was within 4 feet of the deer. And the deer apparently had no fear whatsoever of him. Now, how do I get negative and how do I get positive? What determining factor tonight causes my body chemistry to either be positive or negative? And by the way, it's very simple. It's going to be summed up in just one word: the thought that you have at the moment. For each thought, I have a corresponding body chemistry that agrees. Let's assume that I'm describing you walking 20 floors above a city street on a tight wire. And all you have is a pole to balance you. Now, if I begin to put some detail in my description, what happens to the palm of your hands? A little wet. Are you having a body chemistry to correspond with this? Now, are you comfortable? No, and you would like for me to quit talking about this and talk about the warm fireplace again. By the way, did you notice this while I'm talking, I'm changing your chemistry? Now, if my thoughts determine whether I'm going to be positive or negative, and I can control my thoughts, can I control my body chemistry? Now, it would seem easy as we're approaching it so far, and before we go any further, let me actually describe the penalties of being positive or negative. And let's go back to the Garden of Eden. Eve thought it would be pretty nice to know good and evil. I mean, she had some ideas that this would make her a better person, and I think she even had some pride here. So in her attempt to improve herself, she had to reap the penalty. Now, what's the penalty of being able to know evil? Death. Now, I want you to keep this in mind and don't water this down tonight as we go along. Every time you determine something is bad, have we introduced a little more death into your life? In other words, to actually have the knowledge of evil actually introduces death. Now we're saying that negative chemistry does what then to you? Kills you. Now it's fortunate that it doesn't kill you all at once. If it did, we would all be dead now. But you see, you have balanced enough negativism with positivism so you're able to come tonight. Are there people tonight that are committed that haven't been as fortunate as you, who have balanced it out with more negativism than positivism, and then they're through? So we say then that my penalty for thinking negative thoughts is death. Now what's the reward for thinking positive thoughts? Life. And we're going to be this basic all the way through tonight. We're talking then about a serious problem which is a matter of life or death. Now, before we leave this particular area, let me emphasize this even stronger. You would actually live a long time if you could have every thought positive. In other words, every negative thought you have had so far, has it shortened your life? If you can just realize this. Now, what if a situation arises where I have proof? I've got proof that will stand up in court. I've got evidence, and I could ask the first 100 people that walk along, in whose side are you on? They would all be on my side because I'm the one that's right. And if I want to persist in being right, I can be dead right. In other words, I'm going to persist in being right because I have the goods now. I have proof. But because of the proof, am I thinking negative? Who's being damaged? Right? If you want to go back and study all the religions of the world, including Christianity, all the philosophies of the world, they're trying to do one basic thing, make you happy, and you can't be happy until you get rid of evil. And have they all, at one way or another, tried to do what? Figure out a way to get rid of negativism. In other words, if they can figure out a way to get rid of the evil or the negativism, have they got it whipped? Now, if I can possibly do this tonight, if I can show you how tonight, could you live a lot longer and a lot happier? But I'm going to run into a problem, and I'm going to run into the same problem that everybody else has run into. All the religions and all the philosophies, and they've all come against the same problem. And by the way, tonight we have no shortcut. We're going to hit the same problem, and here it is. Rational behavior. Reason. There is a certain joy in knowing that you are reasonable, isn't there? There's a certain privilege tonight to know that you have actually been considered a rational being. Not a non-rational being, but a rational being. Now, to be rational, does this mean I have to evaluate? In other words, to be rational, do I have to know good and evil? Now, I'm going to suggest a particular plan of action tonight that will show you how to get rid of negativism, but at the same time you get rid of negativism, you're going to get rid of what? Rational behavior. Now, I would like to show you that life is worth giving up rational behavior, and that rational behavior will end up in death. Now, I know there's some other reasons here besides just pride. We might as well cover a few of them. Another one is the fact that we have a fear that if we're naive, we'll be taken. In other words, we want to make sure that we're not left on the short end of anything. In other words, we want to examine everything to make sure that we get what's coming to us. So I'm going to ask you tonight to give up something else. To give up your actual beliefs that you can take care of yourself and make sure nobody takes advantage of you. Now, in order for you to actually let down your defenses, you're going to have another way to protect yourself. And the new way to protect yourself tonight is for me to introduce you to a law and for you to believe this law. And the law is very simple. If I believe you're going to cheat me, you will. And if I believe you're not going to cheat me, you can't. Even if you want to. Now, if you can believe that law, do you have to defend yourself anymore? All right, I want to give you an actual situation of how the law works. Let's go to Islanders at the end of the runway in Salem. They make octopuses and all other kinds of equipment for circuses, amusement parks. It's a family concern operated by a father and his sons. Now, they hired a man. He came to work for them. He worked a whole year, and they trusted him. They trusted him completely. They even gave him the keys to the warehouse. The police came along to arrest him. They want to know what for, and they said for stealing. And Mr. Islander said, well, this man doesn't steal. He's our most trustworthy employee. And the police said, this man has stolen everything he could get his hands on from birth. Now, they thought there was a mix-up in men, of course. But when they found the man, sure enough, it was the right man the police were looking for. Now, he had stolen some actual parts for his racing car. But he couldn't actually steal the parts because he stole something else and then sold this and bought the parts for his racing car. By the way, those particular parts were in the warehouse for which he had the keys to. And he got caught not in the stealing, but in the selling of the stolen goods. Now, did he involve greater risks by stealing something else which he had to sell to buy what he needed? Now, the police was trying to find out what was wrong with him. In other words, it would appear that he's crazy at first. So when he was asked, why didn't you steal the stuff in the warehouse where you had the keys? Now, here's his answer. He says, I wanted to, and I thought it was the most reasonable thing to do, and I opened the warehouse, and I went in, I put my hand in the bin and couldn't take it out. He said, it made me quite mad. He says, in disgust, I walked out of the warehouse and locked it up and went somewhere else and stole. Now, does the law work? Now, why couldn't he steal when he wanted to? By the way, if you go in the warehouse at night and put your hand in the bin to take the parts that you need, do you want to steal them? Whereas he had his motive, everything was working, but why couldn't he take them? Are you meeting the law that I gave you? In other words, did the law protect Mr. Islander? In other words, there was a law in effect because he believed in this man. Now, this is true as far as restaurants are concerned with bad checks. In other words, if you believe that someone is going to actually rob or cheat you, what have you set into motion? The action. The only way I know to get out of it is actually at the same time to believe you're more skillful and that you'll outmaneuver them, and you can set up a contest, and if you believe you're more skillful, you can win. But if you don't believe you're more skillful, what's going to happen to you? You're going to have to be taken advantage of. Right now, if you believe the law, there's one more disadvantage to going completely positive, and that is that you will be considered and be called and be labeled what we call a Pollyanna. I'll give you some more derogatory words besides just Pollyanna. A slap-happy, carefree. All of these words, you don't really like them. You have connotations. Let's let your mind for a moment now go through different connotations you're placing on these words. Now, I would like to ask you a question. Have you ever known of a single bank that's been robbed by a Pollyanna? And has a Pollyanna ever done anything to harm you in this world? Now, ask yourself, frankly, why do you not like Pollyannas? What's wrong with them? They tend to become very wealthy. They tend to have an abundance of material items, and even more so, they have an abundance of friends. In other words, people like to be around somebody who has a warmth toward them and who accepts them. If you had your choice tonight of meeting two people, one immediately accepts you, the way Will Rogers accepts people. He said, I never met a man I didn't like. Instantaneously, you would be accepted. Or how would you like to meet somebody else who's going to spend about 1 or 2 hours evaluating you first? I mean, he wants to make sure you're really okay. He's going to consider all the facts and analyze everything, and then he'll make an opinion whether he really will accept you or will not accept you. How do you feel, by the way, during the 2 hours? Comfortable? No, you wonder, well, what's he looking at now? I wonder what he doesn't like now. You suppose I'll pass the test. And chances are you won't even stay for the verdict. You'll leave. We're going to look at this basic body chemistry tonight in a diagram, or we're going to call it an affectional field diagram.